the case where I had the most deep satisfaction was the case I called the Kresch case, ACLU versus Allegheny County, where after many, many years of Allegheny County putting a creche, a traditional Christmas creche with traditional figures, indistinguishable from something you would see inside a Catholic church. In Allegheny County, they had such a creche every year at the main staircase of the courthouse. You would walk into the courthouse, and here was the state buildings, the city buildings, and courts where people were being tried, most criminal cases, and on the main staircase, the staircase of the courthouse was this creche. And the ACLU that I became active in the day I went into practice brought a case against the county and the city to remove that, and saying that it violated the First Amendment and free exercise clause.
You say the ACLU brought it, but you were involved in it. You were the lawyer.
I was the lawyer who
won.
tried it.
Yeah.
I was on their board. I had been on their board starting with when I got out of law school, when I learned about them. But I tried it. I lost in federal court here at the trial level. We appealed and went to the circuit court, and there I won. Actually, 2-1 I won. And then the city appealed, and the county appealed to the United States Supreme Court, and the United States Supreme Court took certiorari, and I was fortunate enough to be the lawyer on the case, and I argued the case for the county, and we won, and that creche is no longer being shown at the courthouse. And the most interesting part of that story, to me, one of the most interesting parts, has to do with you, as you know, because when that case came up for argument, who was clerking in the Supreme Court but, you guessed it, my son, Harry Litman, who, of course, was recused. That was all right. Not only was he recused, but he had 2 law clerks, so that's 3 out of 4. 2 law clerks who felt they were close enough to him and to me that they should recuse themselves. So I lost the best 3 clerks deciding the case. Now, if his judge, Justice Kennedy, whom I like very much, who decided against me, if he had recused himself, that would have been great. But he didn't.
No such luck.
Yeah. But arguing that case, when I walked into court that day, I worked very hard. I prepared more for that case than any case in my life, because I was determined that even though I had never argued a case in the Supreme Court, I was going to do as good a job as anybody could do on that case. So I really worked hard on it. So when I walked into court that day to argue the case, it was intimidating to have the justices, 9 of them, seated up there so close. But it was almost equally intimidating to have not just my son, he'd be forgiving, but all these law clerks who came to listen to the argument. Harry's mother is arguing, so you can imagine the burden that put on
What pressure.
me. But I think I passed the test.
And won the case. So when you were arguing before the Supreme Court, many lawyers dream of something like that. Do you remember how you felt? Do you remember thinking, holy cow, here I am in the Supreme Court? Do you remember being nervous? What was it like?
Yeah, well, it was very interesting because it wasn't what I would have predicted at all. I already said that I worked very hard. Among other things I did, and most lawyers couldn't do that. I had the luxury of not getting paid any money and still putting in all this time. I went to the transcripts of cases that had been argued by lawyers who were renowned Supreme Court advocates, and I read their arguments. Several times in the year leading up to my own argument, I found out when very good advocates were going to be arguing before the court, and I went to the court and I sat and I listened to them. So it's kind of like the experience that Daddy and I did when we went to watch lawyers try cases. so I stole from them. But I wanted to see what it was like and how it would be handled by someone who really knew what he was doing. I had the cases that were relevant. I had note cards on each case, and I had really prepared. I had them all down, just dead to the last item of interest. And then I had the ACLU did a moot court for me. By that I mean they set up a panel. They asked lawyers who are prominent in that field to serve as the justices, and you go through an argument. And they were going to do a couple of them, and we did one, and they said that they thought it was good enough. We didn't need to do another one, which felt pretty good. So that helped my confidence level. And then I went to Washington early. Daddy and I had talked about preparation and so forth. But I went, the expense was not any question, and we stayed at the hotel, and I worked, and then the night before I didn't work. When I got up that morning and I went to the Supreme Court, it was with such a feeling of calm. It was amazing. And I walked into that courtroom where I knew the 9 justices sat, and I just said to myself, you know more about these cases than any one of them can possibly remember. You, Rosalind, know more about this case and the background cases than anybody in the courtroom. And I really felt that way. So when I got down there, it's very different arguing in the Supreme Court. I had argued in lots of appellate courts, the Pennsylvania Supreme Court. But there, it's a bench, and they're like in a row. In the Supreme Court, it's an oval, and they're sitting in front of you like this, and you're in the well, and you feel closer to each justice than in any appellate court I've ever been to, and but it was a wonderful feeling. I felt less nervous at that Supreme Court argument than I could have ever imagined was possible.
And now that argument is in a lot of the books that advocates today go to review. Okay, well, as that case illustrates, the ACLU has been a really important part of your professional life, your life, from the beginning of your practice. Want to tell us a little bit about your involvement with the ACLU over the years?
Sure. When I went to law school, I had never heard of the ACLU. When I lived in New York, I had never heard of the ACLU. In my last year of law school, I had a teacher, Bill Schultz, who taught administrative law. He was a Republican ACLUer in the days when you had Republican ACLU. You still have some, but not as many as you used to. And he was friendly with Bill Schultz. He was friendly with somebody else on the faculty named Henry Foster. And one day, Professor Schultz said to me, he gave me the highest grade in his administrative law class exam, and he said to me, I just have to tell you that was such a beautiful exam, it was really, really fine. I'd like you to meet Professor Foster. I had never had him. He taught family law. And so he takes me into Harry Foster's office, which is bookshelves lined with all kinds of books, but not all of them are the case books that the reporters that you're used to seeing in the law office. A lot of them are books on civil liberties, civil rights, human rights, and they start to talk to me. They are both active in this organization called Had I ever heard of the American Civil Liberties Union? No, I had never heard of the American Civil Liberties Union. So they begin to tell me about it and how great it is and how it protects the First Amendment and how it protects the people's individual rights, criminals accused of things, civil liberties cases. And they tell me, and it sounds like a very interesting case, maybe you'd like to read this book. They give me 2 books to read, and then I return them. And then they tell me, when we're all through talking, I'm a senior. We think that we could probably put you in a position you could represent this group. When you get out of law school, would that be something you would be interested in? Well, by that time I was hooked. I had read about this magical organization started in 1920, protecting people's rights and arguing more cases in the Supreme Court than anyone except the United States government. They got all through getting me interested in it before they said to me, of course it would be pro bono. But by that time I was hooked. So I became a member of this very small board, which we had then, and then I was counsel for a while. I got to represent, much to my father's total chagrin, the American Nazi Party, which came here to do a demonstration, and we, the ACLU, defended their rights to demonstrate. Cyril Wecht, who was involved with this at the time, was saying, they'll be walking you to the gas chamber and you'll be saying, I defend your right to condemn me. And my father just could never quite overcome it. But so I remained active on the board here in Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh was a very active board. And the ACLU had a wonderful program that cared about all kinds of rights, the whole Bill of Rights. And after my kids got older and after I got a little more time in my own practice, I became active in the state affiliate, Pennsylvania. And then they asked me if I would be their representative to the National Board, which was really thrilling to me. The National Board has 70 directors and from all over the country, and I was Pennsylvania's, and it was and is a thrilling experience for me. I go to the National Board meetings, and I'm very fortunate. I've been elected to the Executive Committee, and even more fortunate than that, more
select
elected. I'm one of their. We have 3 National Council, ACLU Council, and I'm one of those. And that's pretty thrilling to me. We get to confer with our legal director on cases going to the Supreme Court. Shall we take them? Shall we do this brief or that? And it's really very, very exciting, heady, important in my judgment work. And I'm fortunate to have been successfully involved in the ACLU all these years. I love it. It's a great organization.